Charles Collins's diplomatic career flashed before his eyes as Wezin's scaled fingers innocently grazed his thigh, triggering an immediate and unmistakable physical response. The young saurian female's eyes widened, her forked tongue flicking out in curiosity as she noticed the sudden change in the human ambassador's biology. "Human, why does your love muscle twitch when I touch it?" Wezin asked, her voice carrying across the Grand Hall of Unity. Charles froze, acutely aware of the hundreds of reptilian eyes now fixed upon him. The Saurian High Council members, perched on their elevated seats, leaned forward with interest. Ambassador Kazoth's stern gaze bore into Charles, his clawed hands gripping the arms of his ornate chair. This was not how Earth's bid for admission to the Galactic Council was supposed to go. Months of careful negotiations, years of technological advancements in faster-than-light travel, and centuries of Saurian observation of humanity had led to this moment. Now a simple biological function threatened to unravel it all. Dr. Marcus Reeves, Charles's colleague and resident xenobiologist, stepped forward, ready to offer a scientific explanation. But Charles raised a hand, silencing him. This was a diplomatic mission, and it required a diplomat's touch. "Esteemed members of the Saurian High Council," Charles began, his voice steady despite the uncomfortable tightness in his trousers. "What you've witnessed is a natural human physiological response. It demonstrates our species' capacity for quick adaptation and readiness." A murmur rippled through the assembled aliens. Charles could see the wheels turning in their highly logical minds, processing this new information about human biology. Ambassador Kazoth's voice cut through the whispers. "Explain further, human. How does this reaction prove your species' worthiness to join galactic society?" Charles took a deep breath, acutely aware that Earth's future hung in the balance. The massive structure of the Hall of Unity, with its soaring ceilings and advanced technology, suddenly felt oppressive. He could feel the weight of rival alien factions' gazes, those who opposed Earth's admission and would seize upon any excuse to paint humans as impulsive and uncontrolled. "Our body's quick responses allow us to adapt rapidly to new situations," Charles explained, thinking on his feet. "This trait has driven our technological progress, including our recent development of faster-than-light travel that brought us to your world." Wezin, still standing close, nodded enthusiastically. "Fascinating. The human form is so responsive. I would very much like to study this further." Charles managed a diplomatic smile, silently cursing the Saurians' advanced biotechnology and mastery of genetic engineering. Of course, they would be intrigued by human physiology. As the High Council deliberated in hushed tones, Charles realized the gravity of the situation. If he failed to turn this embarrassing incident into a positive representation of humanity, Earth could face centuries of quarantine from galactic society. The hopes and dreams of billions rested on his ability to explain human biology and outmaneuver political opponents. With a steady voice belying his inner turmoil, Charles pressed on. "Honored Council, let this moment serve not as a source of confusion, but as a bridge of understanding between our species. Humanity's readiness to join the galactic community is evident in our adaptability, our curiosity, and our earnest desire for cooperation." The fate of Earth hung in the balance as Charles waited for the Saurian response, praying that his words and his body's inadvertent demonstration had not doomed humanity's cosmic aspirations. Ambassador Kazoth's scaled fingers drummed against the arm of his chair, the sharp clacking echoing through the suddenly silent Hall of Unity. His yellow eyes narrowed as he regarded Charles, who stood rigid, sweat beading on his brow. "This demonstration of human biology requires further discussion," Kazoth announced, his voice carrying a hint of disdain. "The High Council will convene an emergency session immediately. Ambassador Collins, you will remain here until summoned." As the Saurian dignitaries filed out, Charles caught Dr. Reeves's concerned gaze. The xenobiologist opened his mouth to speak, but Charles shook his head slightly. Now was not the time for scientific explanations. They needed a diplomatic miracle. Hours crawled by as Charles paced the empty hall, his mind racing. When a young Saurian aide finally approached, Charles steeled himself for the worst. "The High Council will see you now, human," the aide hissed, leading Charles through winding corridors. The council chamber was a stark contrast to the Grand Hall of Unity. Here the walls were adorned with ancient Saurian texts and holographic displays of star charts. The council members perched on elevated platforms, their scales gleaming under the harsh lighting. Ambassador Kazoth's voice cut through the tense atmosphere. "Ambassador Collins, your earlier incident has raised serious concerns about human stability and suitability for galactic membership." Charles took a deep breath, knowing his next words could determine Earth's fate. "Esteemed council members, I humbly request a private audience to fully explain human physiology. What you witnessed was an involuntary response, one that speaks to our species' capacity for strong emotional connections." A murmur rippled through the council. Elder Cesara, her scales a pale blue with age, leaned forward. "Intriguing. Perhaps there is more to learn about these humans." For the next hour, Charles provided a clinical explanation of human reproductive biology, careful to emphasize the evolutionary advantages and social implications. As he spoke, he noticed a shift in the council's demeanor. Some, like Kazoth, remained skeptical, but others listened with growing interest. Elder Cesara's eyes gleamed with curiosity. "This pair bonding you describe, it could have interesting implications for galactic society. Tell us more, human." As Charles elaborated, he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this embarrassing incident could be turned into an opportunity for greater understanding. Meanwhile, in the temporary human quarters, Dr. Marcus Reeves hunched over a datapad, his fingers flying across the screen. He had been granted limited access to the Saurian biological database, and what he found sent a surge of excitement through him. "Charles, you need to see this," Reeves muttered to himself, making notes for their next meeting. Back in the council chamber, Charles concluded his explanation. Kazoth's expression remained impassive, but several other council members nodded thoughtfully. "We will consider your words, Ambassador Collins," Kazoth declared. "For now, you are dismissed." As Charles exited the chamber, he nearly collided with a tall reptilian figure. Wezen stood before him, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Human, I wish to learn more about your species," she said, her forked tongue flicking out nervously. "Perhaps we could discuss further." Charles hesitated, acutely aware of the diplomatic tightrope he walked. "Of course, Wezen, but perhaps in a more public setting?" As they made their way to a communal area, Charles noticed a commotion near the spaceport. A sleek, iridescent ship had just landed, its design unlike anything he had seen before. "Arcturians," Wezen hissed, her scales filled. "What are they doing here?" Before Charles could respond, his communication device buzzed. President Elena Rodriguez's face appeared on the screen, her expression grim. "Charles, we have a situation," she said without preamble. "The opposition is calling for your immediate recall. I'm holding them off for now, but I need results, fast." Charles swallowed hard. "Understood, Madam President. I have a plan, but I'll need some time." As he ended the call, Charles saw Dr. Reeves hurrying towards him, datapad in hand. "Charles, I've found something," Reeves said breathlessly. "The Saurians have a similar physiological response during their mating season. It's less visible, but it's there. This could be our key to mutual understanding." Charles's mind raced, pieces falling into place. A cultural exchange program began to take shape in his thoughts, a bold, potentially risky plan that could either secure Earth's place in galactic society or doom them to isolation. As he opened his mouth to share his idea with Reeves, a smooth, melodious voice interrupted. "Ambassador Collins, I presume?" Charles turned to see a tall, elegantly dressed alien with shimmering, color-shifting skin. The Arcturian's eyes seemed to bore into him, calculating and cold. "I am Ambassador Zorn of the Arcturian Empire," the alien continued, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I believe we have much to discuss regarding Earth's aspirations." Charles straightened, feeling the weight of Earth's future on his shoulders. The next few days would determine humanity's place in the cosmos, and he knew every word, every action would count. Ambassador Zorn, Charles replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his gut. Welcome to the negotiations. Ambassador Zorn, Charles replied, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his gut. Welcome to the negotiations. Isers, the Arcturian's iridescent skin shimmered as he inclined his head. I look forward to observing Earth's integration into galactic society. Charles caught the hint of condescension in Zorn's tone, but maintained his diplomatic composure. Before he could respond, Dr. Reeves cleared his throat. Charles, a word? Excusing himself, Charles followed Reeves to a quiet corner. The scientist's eyes gleamed with excitement as he thrust his datapad forward. Look at this, the Saurian physiological response I mentioned. It's linked to a dormant gene. If activated, it could allow them to experience emotions similar to humans. Charles's mind raced with the implications. This could be the key to bridging our cultural gap. We need to present this to the High Council immediately. Over the next few days, Charles worked tirelessly to craft a proposal for a cultural exchange program. He emphasized the potential for mutual understanding and growth, carefully balancing the scientific possibilities with diplomatic tact. When he finally stood before the High Council, Charles felt the weight of Earth's future on his shoulders. Esteemed council members, I propose a comprehensive exchange of knowledge and culture between our species. Elder Cesara leaned forward, her pale blue scales catching the light. Elaborate, Ambassador Collins. Charles outlined the program, detailing the exchange of scientists, artists, and athletes. He watched as interest sparked in the eyes of several council members, though Ambassador Kazoth remained impassive. After hours of deliberation, Elder Cesara announced the council's decision. We approve this exchange program, Ambassador Collins, but with strict oversight. As Charles left the chamber, his heart soaring with cautious optimism, he nearly collided with Weezin. I heard the news, she said, her eyes shining. I've been assigned to help coordinate the exchange activities. Charles smiled, ignoring the flutter in his chest. Excellent. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Over the following weeks, Charles and Weezin worked closely together, navigating the complexities of interspecies communication. Charles found himself constantly aware of Weezin's presence, her scales glinting in the light of the Saurian sun as they pored over plans and logistics. As the first human delegation arrived on the Saurian homeworld, Charles stood proudly alongside Weezin, watching the diverse group of Earth's finest disembark. Scientists clutched data pads, artists carried cases of supplies, and athletes stretched their limbs after the long journey. However, not everyone shared their enthusiasm. Ambassador Kazoth observed the proceedings with narrowed eyes before slipping away to a private chamber. There, a holographic image of Ambassador Zorn flickered to life. The humans move faster than anticipated. Zorn's melodious voice filled the room. We must act quickly to prevent their integration. Kazoth nodded, his claws tapping against the console. I have a plan. The upcoming sporting events provide an opportunity to create tension. As the cultural exchange program unfolded, Charles found himself drawn deeper into Saurian society. He marveled at their advanced biotechnology, discussed philosophy with their scholars, and even attempted to appreciate their discordant music. One evening, as he and Weezin watched a stunning double sunset from a high balcony, Charles felt a surge of emotion he couldn't quite name. Weezin turned to him, her scales reflecting the fading light. Charles, I've been thinking about Dr. Reeves's discovery. The possibility of experiencing emotions like humans. It's both exciting and terrifying. Charles nodded, choosing his words carefully. It's a big step, one that could change your entire society. Weezin's forked tongue flicked out nervously. Some see it as an opportunity for greater understanding. Others fear it as a weakness. Before Charles could respond, his communication device buzzed. President Rodriguez's face appeared, her expression grim. Charles, the opposition is gaining ground. They're claiming the exchange program is a security risk. I need you to accelerate our progress. Charles assured her of his commitment, but as he ended the call, he couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. The next day, during a human Saurian sporting event, chaos erupted. A series of equipment malfunctions led to injuries on both sides, sparking outrage and suspicion. As Charles worked to smooth over the incident, he caught sight of Kazoth speaking quietly with Zorn in a shadowy alcove. Their furtive glances sent a chill down his spine. Seeking a distraction from the mounting tensions, Charles agreed to join Weizhen on a scientific expedition to a nearby nebula. As their shuttle left the Saurian atmosphere, he felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. "This nebula contains rare elements," Weizhen explained, her eyes fixed on the swirling colors ahead. "It could be the key to advancing both our species' technologies." Suddenly, alarms blared through the shuttle. Weizhen's claws flew over the control panel as the ship shuddered violently. "We're losing power," she hissed. "Something's interfering with our systems." Charles strapped himself in, heart pounding as Weizhen fought to control their descent towards an uncharted planet below. The shuttle broke through the atmosphere, heat building around them as they plummeted towards the alien landscape. With a bone-jarring impact, they crashed into a dense forest of bioluminescent vegetation. As the dust settled, Charles turned to Weizhen, relieved to see her moving. "Are you all right?" he asked, wincing as he unbuckled his harness. Weizhen nodded, her scales pale with shock. "Yes, but the shuttle is beyond repair. We're stranded." As they emerged from the wreckage, Charles surveyed their surroundings. The alien forest pulsed with eerie light, strange creatures calling in the distance. He met Weizhen's gaze, seeing his own mix of fear and persistence reflected in her reptilian eyes. "We'll find a way to survive," Charles said, reaching out to squeeze Weizhen's scaled hand. "Together." Back on the Saurian homeworld, news of the shuttle's disappearance spread quickly. Dr. Reeves paced anxiously in the human quarters, his mind racing with possibilities. Meanwhile, in a secluded laboratory, Elder Cesara made a momentous decision. With trembling claws, she activated the dormant emotional gene within herself, prepared to embrace a new way of experiencing the world. As a joint human-Saurian rescue mission mobilized, Ambassador Kazoth seized the opportunity to address the High Council. His voice rang out, filled with false concern. "Esteemed colleagues, this tragic incident proves the dangers of hasty integration. We must reconsider Earth's place in galactic society." The council chamber erupted in debate, the fate of human-Saurian relations hanging in the balance. Unknown to all, Earth's most advanced stealth ships hovered at the edge of Saurian space, a silent contingency plan that threatened to upend the delicate diplomatic balance. On the uncharted planet, Charles and Weizhen huddled in a makeshift shelter, the alien night closing in around them. As they awaited rescue, both realized that their survival and the future of their species' relationship depended on their ability to work together in the face of the unknown. Unknown challenges ahead. The bioluminescent forest pulsed around them, casting an ethereal glow on their makeshift shelter. Suddenly, a low hum pierced the alien night. Charles and Weizhen emerged from their shelter, squinting at the sky. A sleek spacecraft descended through the atmosphere, its hull bearing both human and Saurian markings. "They found us," Charles breathed, relief washing over him. As the rescue team disembarked, led by a grizzled human captain and a Saurian scientist, Charles realized how much had changed. He and Weizhen moved in perfect synchronization, anticipating each other's needs without a word. The rescue team exchanged glances, noting the unusual dynamic between the human ambassador and the Saurian liaison. During the journey back to the Saurian homeworld, Charles and Weizhen recounted their experiences. They described how they'd worked together to survive, sharing knowledge of alien flora and fauna, combining their unique skills to overcome obstacles. With each story, the rescue team's expressions shifted from curiosity to admiration. Upon their return, Charles and Weizhen were immediately whisked into separate debriefings. Charles found himself facing a stern-faced President Rodriguez via hologram. "Your survival is fortunate, Ambassador," Rodriguez said, her eyes narrowing. "But your extended absence has complicated matters." Before Charles could respond, the door burst open. Elder Cesara strode in, her scales shimmering with an intensity Charles had never seen before. "President Rodriguez," Cesara said, her voice quavering with unfamiliar emotion, "I must speak with you both." Cesara revealed her genetic alteration to activate emotional responses similar to humans. her scales flushed with color as she described the depth of her new experiences. "This is the key to true understanding between our species," she declared. News of Cesara's transformation spread rapidly. Young Saurians gathered in the streets, their eyes wide with curiosity and hope. Conservatives retreated to their enclaves, hissing about the erosion of their way of life. Amidst the chaos, Ambassador Kazoth slipped away to a secure communication room. His claws danced over the controls, transmitting classified data to a hidden receiver. "Let's see how the humans explain this," he muttered. Within hours, galactic media outlets exploded with reports of Earth's clandestine military buildup. Alien races across the galaxy demanded Earth's immediate expulsion from the Galactic Council. President Rodriguez stood before a sea of holographic projections, facing representatives from dozens of alien civilizations. She took a deep breath, her posture straight and unwavering. "Yes, Earth has increased its military capabilities," she admitted. The chamber erupted in angry hisses and clicks. Rodriguez raised her hand for silence. "But not as an act of aggression. We invite a coalition of races, including our Saurian friends, to inspect our facilities and participate in joint exercises. We have nothing to hide." The chamber fell silent, alien diplomats conferring in hushed tones. Meanwhile, on the Saurian homeworld, a public ceremony celebrating interspecies cooperation was underway. Dr. Marcus Reeves stood at a podium, delivering a speech on the potential of his emotional activation research. Suddenly, a flash of light erupted from the crowd. When it faded, Reeves was gone. Chaos ensued. Charles, standing nearby with Wezen, immediately sprang into action. "We need to form a search team," he shouted over the panicked crowd. "Now!" Within hours, Charles had assembled a diverse group of humans, Saurians, and even a few intrigued members of other alien races. As they prepared to depart, Wezen pulled Charles aside. "Charles, I need to tell you something," she said, her voice trembling. "Ever since our time on that planet, I've been experiencing strange sensations. Emotions, I think, like the ones Cesara described." Charles stared at her, his mind racing. Before he could respond, an alarm blared, signaling the search team's departure. Back on Earth, Senator Victor Graves stood before a roaring crowd. "We cannot trust these aliens," he thundered. "Earth for humans!" The crowd's angry chants echoed through the streets, reaching the ears of President Rodriguez in her office. She gripped the edge of her desk, the weight of humanity's future heavy on her shoulders. In the depths of space, the Arcturian ship carrying the kidnapped Dr. Reeves received an unexpected transmission. A ship of impossible design approached, its very presence defying known laws of physics. "Attention, Arcturian vessel!" A voice unlike any they'd heard before resonated through their communication system. "We are the Progenitors. Your interference in our grand experiment ends now." As the Progenitor's ship engaged the Arcturians, the search team led by Charles and Wezen tracked Reeves' unique biosignature. They closed in on the Arcturian vessel, unaware of the cosmic drama unfolding before them. Charles stood on the bridge of their ship, Wezen at his side. Her scales shimmered with new, unfamiliar patterns, a visible sign of her internal transformation. As they approached the Arcturian vessel, the massive Progenitor ship came into view. "By the moons!" Wezen gasped, her newly awakened emotions evident in her voice. The search team watched in awe as the Progenitor ship effortlessly disabled the Arcturian vessel. A tractor beam enveloped both ships, drawing them towards the Progenitor's impossibly vast hangar bay. As they were pulled in, Charles saw Dr. Reeves floating in a stasis field, unharmed but unconscious. The Arcturians, their shimmering skin dull with fear, were corralled by beings of pure energy. A Progenitor materialized before them, its form constantly shifting between humanoid, saurian, and other alien shapes. When it spoke, its voice resonated in their minds. "Humans, saurians, children of our ancient experiment, the time has come for you to understand your true heritage." Charles and Wezen exchanged glances, their shared experiences on the alien planet having prepared them, in some small way, for this cosmic revelation. As the Progenitor began to explain their grand design, Charles realized that the fate of not just Earth or the Saurians, but the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. The revelation of the progenitors sent shockwaves through the assembled group. Humans, saurians, and other alien representatives listened in stunned silence as the energy being recounted a tale of galactic engineering spanning millions of years. Your species were not random products of evolution, the progenitor explained, its form continually morphing. You were carefully designed to complement each other, to eventually come together and unlock your full potential. Dr. Reeves, now awake and free from the stasis field, stepped forward. The emotional activation in saurians, was that part of your plan? The progenitor's form flickered with what might have been approval. A crucial step, the human capacity for emotion, combined with saurian logic and resilience, will create a crucial step indeed, Charles mused, his heart pounding from the implications. He glanced at Wezen, noting the vibrant patterns rippling across her scales, a visible manifestation of her newfound emotions. The progenitor's form shimmered, its ever-changing appearance mesmerizing. Your species were designed to complement each other, to unlock potential far beyond your current capabilities. Dr. Reeves stepped forward, his scientific curiosity overriding his recent ordeal. But why? What's the purpose behind this grand experiment? Before the progenitor could respond, a blinding light engulfed them. When it faded, they found themselves back on their own ship, the progenitors and their vessel nowhere to be seen. Did that really happen? One of the human crew members asked, voicing the collective disbelief. Charles nodded grimly. It did, and now we have to deal with the consequences. Within hours, news of the progenitor's revelation spread across the galaxy. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session, holographic representations of various species flickering to life in the grand chamber. Charles stood before them, his posture straight despite his exhaustion. Esteemed members of the Council, in light of these extraordinary claims, I propose a joint human-saurian research mission to investigate the progenitor's assertions. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. The Arcturian representative, a being of shimmering light, spoke up. How can we trust the findings of such a mission? Both humans and saurians have a vested interest in the outcome. That's precisely why we're proposing a joint mission, Charles countered. Our two species will serve as checks on each other. We invite observers from other council races to join us as well. After hours of heated debate, the council agreed to postpone their decision on Earth membership pending the results of the proposed mission. Back on Earth, President Elena Rodriguez stood in the Oval Office, her face illuminated by the holographic display of the Prometheus, Earth's most advanced research vessel. Are you certain about this, Madam President? Her chief of staff asked. Sending our flagship on such a mission could be seen as a provocation by some. Rodriguez's eyes never left the display. It's a calculated risk, but one we must take. The Prometheus isn't just a ship. It's a symbol of what humanity can achieve. It's time we showed the galaxy what we're truly capable of. On the Saurian homeworld, the High Council chambers echoed with hisses and clicks as members debated their response. Elder Cesara, her scales shimmering with newfound emotion, addressed her peers. We cannot ignore this opportunity, she urged. The Krath is our most advanced research vessel. It is the logical choice for this mission. Ambassador Kazoth's tail lashed in agitation. And who would you propose to lead this mission? Someone who has allowed their judgment to be clouded by human-like emotions. Cesara's gaze fell on Wezen, who stood quietly at the back of the chamber. I nominate Liaison Wezen. Her unique physiological changes make her the ideal bridge between our species. As preparations for the mission began, Dr. Marcus Reeves sequestered himself in his lab aboard the Prometheus. Days of relentless work paid off when he made a startling discovery. Look at this, he said, gesturing to his holographic display as Charles entered the lab. A complex double helix rotated slowly, certain sections highlighted in pulsing red. I've identified a dormant genetic sequence in both human and saurian DNA. It's clearly artificial in origin. Charles leaned in, his eyes wide. This could lend credibility to the progenitor's claims. Have you shared this with the saurian team? Reeves nodded. I sent the data to Wezen an hour ago. She's already confirmed similar findings in their genetic samples. As news of the discovery spread, Tensions on Earth reached a boiling point. Senator Victor Graves stood before a roaring crowd in Washington, D.C., his voice thundering over the loudspeakers. "We're being manipulated," he shouted, his face red with anger. "These so-called progenitors are nothing more than another alien threat, trying to control us through lies and false promises." The crowd's angry chants echoed through the streets, drowning out the voices of those calling for calm and cooperation. In orbit above Earth, final preparations for the mission were underway. Charles found himself assigned as the human diplomatic liaison aboard the HFY Sci, a development that both excited and unnerved him. As he boarded the saurian vessel, Wazin greeted him, her scales shimmering with subtle patterns he was only beginning to understand. "Welcome aboard, Charles. I trust you'll find your quarters satisfactory." Their eyes met, and Charles felt a flutter in his chest that had nothing to do with diplomatic relations. "I'm sure I will, Wazin. I look forward to working closely with you on this mission." As Wazin led him through the ship's winding corridors, neither of them noticed the small, nondescript craft that detached itself from the nearby space station. The Arcturian stealth ship engaged its cloaking device and fell into formation behind the departing research fleet, its mission of sabotage about to begin. The joint fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving behind a solar system roiling with uncertainty and hope. Ahead lay the coordinates provided by the progenitors, and perhaps the answers to questions that had plagued both species since they first looked up at the stars and wondered about their place in the universe. As the ship streaked through the void, Charles stood on the observation deck of the Siskrath, watching the stars blur into streaks of light. Wazin joined him, her presence a comforting warmth at his side. "What do you think we'll find out there?" Charles asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Wazin's scales rippled with a pattern he had come to associate with contemplation. "I don't know," she admitted, "but whatever it is, I believe it will change everything." Little did they know how prophetic those words would prove to be, as the fleet hurtled towards a destiny neither humans nor saurians could have imagined, with an unseen threat lurking in their wake, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Strike. The Arcturian stealth ship, its cloaking device still engaged, maneuvered silently towards the massive Progenitor space station that loomed before the human saurian fleet. As the research vessels prepared to dock, the Arcturians launched their attack. A series of explosions rocked the station, catching everyone off guard. Alarms blared throughout the Siskrath as Charles and Wazin rushed to the bridge. "Status report," Wazin demanded, her scales flashing with urgency. "Multiple detonations detected on the Progenitor station," a saurian officer reported. "Critical systems are failing across all sectors." Charles activated the ship-wide communication system. "This is Charles Collins. All personnel, prepare for immediate evacuation and rescue operations. This is not a drill." Wazin turned to him, her eyes gleaming with a mix of fear and drive. "We need to coordinate our efforts with the Prometheus." As chaos erupted around them, Charles and Wazin found themselves working in perfect sync. They directed the human and saurian crews, orchestrating a complex dance of shuttle movements and rescue operations. "We can't leave without the genetic data," Charles insisted as they boarded a shuttle to the failing station. "It's too important." The shuttle docked with a jarring thud. Charles and Wazin led a mixed team of humans and saurians through the crumbling corridors of the Progenitor station. The air was thick with smoke, and the walls groaned ominously. "This way," Wazin called out, her enhanced sense of direction guiding them through the labyrinth of alien architecture. They reached the central data hub, where Dr. Reeves was frantically working to download the vital genetic information. "We're at 90%, he shouted over the din of alarms and creaking metal. Another explosion rocked the station, sending debris raining down around them. Charles shielded Wazin instinctively, their bodies pressed close as they took cover. "There," Dr. Reeves exclaimed, "download complete." As they turned to leave, Charles noticed a faint glow emanating from behind a partially collapsed wall. "Wait," he said, moving towards the light. "Charles, we don't have time," Wazin protested, but followed him nonetheless. They squeezed through the gap in the wall, finding themselves in a hidden chamber filled with pulsing, otherworldly technology. At the center stood a device unlike anything they had ever seen. "It's Progenitor tech," Charles breathed, reaching out to touch it. The moment his fingers made contact, a holographic projection filled the room. A being of pure energy, constantly shifting form, appeared before them. "Greetings, children of our grand experiment," the progenitor's voice resonated in their minds. "If you are witnessing this message, then the time has come for you to understand the full extent of your potential." The hologram flickered as another tremor shook the station. The progenitor continued, "Humans and saurians were designed to unlock latent abilities when in close proximity to each other. These abilities have the power to revolutionize both your species' development and reshape the future of the galaxy." Before they could process this revelation, a deafening crack split the air. The ceiling began to cave in, forcing Charles and Weizhen deeper into the chamber as debris blocked their exit. "We're trapped!" Weizhen exclaimed, her scales pulsing with fear. Charles looked around frantically, searching for another way out. "There has to be a way," he said, his voice strained. As the minutes ticked by and the station continued to break apart around them, Charles and Weizhen found themselves pressed close together in the shrinking space. Suddenly, Charles felt a surge of energy coursing through his body. His muscles tensed, and his senses sharpened to an almost painful degree. Beside him, Weizhen gasped. Her scales were rippling with patterns he had never seen before, and her eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. "Charles," she said, her voice filled with awe, "I can feel everything, every emotion, every thought process. It's like I can see the patterns of the universe." Without thinking, Charles reached out and lifted a massive piece of debris that had been blocking their path. He stared at his hands in disbelief. "How did I do that?" "The progenitor message," Weizhen realized. "Our proximity must have triggered the latent abilities they spoke of." Using their newfound powers, they navigated the collapsing structure with incredible speed and precision. Charles's enhanced strength and reflexes allowed him to clear paths and avoid falling debris, while Weizhen's heightened emotional intelligence guided them through the chaos, anticipating where the next danger would come from. They burst out of the doomed station moments before it exploded in a spectacular display of light and energy. As they caught their breath in the safety of a rescue shuttle, the gravity of what had just occurred began to sink in. Their relief was short-lived. The Arcturian saboteurs, believing their mission accomplished, decloaked their ship and launched an attack on the human and saurian vessels. "We need to get back to the fleet," Charles said, his enhanced reflexes kicking in as he took control of the shuttle's controls. Weizhen nodded, her mind already racing through possible strategies. "I can sense their tactical intentions. If we coordinate our efforts, we can outmaneuver them." Charles piloted the shuttle with inhuman precision, dodging enemy fire and relaying Weizhen's tactical insights to the fleet. The human and saurian ships, guided by their instructions, moved in perfect harmony. The battle was intense but brief. The Arcturians, caught off guard by the unexpected level of coordination between the human and saurian forces, soon found themselves outmaneuvered and outgunned. As the last Arcturian ship was disabled and boarded, Charles and Weizhen exchanged a look of shared triumph and bewilderment. The full implications of their transformation were only beginning to dawn on them. Back on the Krath, as the captive Arcturians were being processed, a startling discovery was made. Among the enemy's communication logs, they found evidence of correspondence with Ambassador Kazoth, exposing his betrayal of the Saurian High Council. "This changes everything," Weizhen said, her scales shimmering with a mix of anger and dedication. Charles nodded, his mind racing with the potential consequences. "We need to get this information back to Earth and the Saurian homeworld immediately." As they prepared to return home, both Charles and Weizhen knew that nothing would ever be the same. The events at the Progenitor station had not only transformed them personally, but had set in motion changes that would reshape the future of both their species and their place in the galactic community. The journey back was filled with anticipation and uncertainty. What awaited them? How would their respective worlds react to the revelations about the progenitors, the betrayal of Kazoth, and the astonishing potential of human-saurian cooperation? As the fleet dropped out of FTL on the outskirts of the solar system, Charles and Wazin stood side by side on the bridge of the Cess Crath, their enhanced abilities humming just beneath the surface. They exchanged a glance, sensing the weight of the moment. "Whatever happens next," Charles said, his voice low, "we face it together." Wazin's scales rippled with a pattern that Charles now recognized as affirmation and solidarity. "Together," she agreed, as Earth grew larger in the view screen before them. Them. As the fleet approached Earth, the magnitude of their discoveries began to sink in. Charles and Wazin exchanged glances, their enhanced abilities allowing them to sense the mix of excitement and apprehension in each other. "We need to prepare for the debriefing," Charles said, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions beneath the surface. Wazin's scales rippled with agreement. "The implications of what we've learned, it will change everything." The moment their ships docked, Charles and Wazin found themselves at the center of a storm of activity. Scientists, military personnel, and government officials swarmed around them, eager to hear first-hand accounts of what had transpired at the Progenitor station. Over the next few weeks, Charles and Wazin underwent extensive testing and examination. Researchers from both Earth and the Saurian homeworld worked tirelessly to understand the nature of their newly awakened abilities. Dr. Elena Martinez, the lead human researcher, watched in amazement as Charles effortlessly lifted a weight that would normally require heavy machinery. "The enhancement to your physical capabilities is extraordinary," she noted, scribbling furiously on her tablet. Meanwhile, Wazin demonstrated her heightened emotional intelligence by accurately predicting the reactions of various test subjects to complex scenarios. Her Saurian colleague, Dr. Zaxlor, shook his head in wonder. "Your ability to read and interpret emotional patterns is unlike anything we've ever seen." As the days passed, a startling discovery emerged. The researchers found that when Charles and Wazin maintained physical contact, their abilities intensified dramatically. This revelation led to the formation of the Human-Saurian Integration Project, HFY, an ambitious initiative aimed at exploring the full potential of human-Saurian cooperation. President Elena Rodriguez addressed a joint session of the United Nations and the Saurian High Council via holographic projection. "The HSIP represents a new frontier in interspecies collaboration," she declared. "We stand on the brink of a new era of mutual understanding and shared progress." The announcement of the HSIP sparked a wave of excitement across both worlds. Thousands of volunteers, both human and Saurian, eagerly signed up for the chance to participate in this groundbreaking experiment. Charles and Wazin found themselves appointed as co-directors of the project. Their unique bond and first-hand experience with the phenomenon made them the obvious choice to lead this unprecedented endeavor. As plans for a massive space station to house the HSIP volunteers took shape, Charles and Wazin threw themselves into their work. They spent long hours poring over design specifications, coordinating with construction teams, and developing protocols for the integration process. One evening, as they reviewed the latest progress reports in Charles's office aboard the Cess Crath, Wazin noticed Charles's furrowed brow and tense posture. "You're worried about something," she said, her scales shimmering with concern. Charles sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's just the scale of what we're doing, the responsibility. Sometimes it feels overwhelming." Wazin moved closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. The moment their skin made contact, they both felt the familiar surge of energy. Charles's worry seemed to melt away, replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. "We're in this together," Wazin reminded him, her voice soft but firm. Charles nodded, grateful for her presence. As he looked into her eyes, he felt a flutter in his chest that had nothing to do with their enhanced abilities. The growing intimacy between them was becoming harder to ignore, even as their professional duties demanded more and more of their attention. Their moment was interrupted by an urgent communication from Earth. Senator Victor Graves, a vocal opponent of the Human-Saurian Alliance, was giving a fiery speech to a crowd of supporters. "We are losing our identity," Graves shouted, his face red with anger. "This so-called integration is nothing more than an alien takeover of our species." Charles and Wazin watched the footage with growing concern. They knew that not everyone would embrace the changes brought about by their discoveries, but the vehemence of Graves' opposition was alarming. On the Saurian homeworld, similar voices of dissent were emerging. A group of conservative elders, led by the disgraced ambassador Kazoth, began spreading rumors about the dangers of emotional awakening and the loss of Saurian cultural purity. As Charles and Wazin grappled with these internal challenges, a new threat loomed on the horizon. Intelligence reports indicated that the Arcturian Empire, humiliated by the exposure of their failed sabotage attempt, was mobilizing its military forces. Admiral Sarah Chen, head of Earth Space Force, delivered a grim briefing to Charles and Wazin. Our sources indicate that the Arcturians are planning a large-scale attack on both Earth and the Saurian homeworld, she explained, her face grave. They aim to prevent our alliance from growing stronger. The news galvanized the Human-Saurian alliance into action. President Rodriguez and the Saurian High Council agreed to accelerate their plans for joint defense. Human engineers began working alongside Saurian scientists to develop new weapons systems that combine the strengths of both species. Charles found himself in awe as he toured a prototype facility where the first human-Saurian hybrid starships were being constructed. These vessels, designed to be operated by mixed crews, represented the pinnacle of their combined technological prowess. "It's incredible," Charles murmured as he ran his hand along the sleek hull of a fighter craft. "A few months ago, we could barely communicate with each other. Now look at what we've achieved together." Wazin nodded, her scales pulsing with pride and excitement. "This is just the beginning, Charles. Imagine what we'll be capable of once the HFY is fully operational." As tensions with the Arcturian Empire escalated, Charles and Wazin received an unexpected summons. The Galactic Council had convened an emergency session to address the growing crisis, and they were called to testify about the potential of human-Saurian cooperation. The journey to the Council's neutral space station was tense. Charles and Wazin spent hours preparing their testimony, knowing that the fate of their alliance could hinge on their ability to convince the Council of the value of their cooperation. As they entered the Grand Council chambers, Charles felt a wave of nervousness wash over him. Billions of beings across the galaxy would be watching this proceedings. He glanced at Wazin, drawing strength from her steady presence at his side. The Council President, a tall, ethereal being from a species Charles didn't recognize, called the session to order. "We are here today to consider the petition for joint membership from Earth and the Saurian homeworld, and to address the threat posed by the Arcturian Empire's recent aggression," she intoned. As Charles stepped forward to begin their testimony, he suddenly felt a sharp prickle at the base of his skull. Without thinking, he reached out and grabbed Wazin's hand. In that instant, their enhanced abilities flared to life, and they both perceived a hidden danger in the room. There, concealed behind a shimmering cloak of advanced technology, crouched an Arcturian assassin. Its weapon was trained directly on the Council President. Without hesitation, Charles and Wazin sprang into action. Charles's enhanced strength allowed him to leap across the chamber with incredible speed, while Wazin's heightened perception guided his movements. Together, they managed to disarm and subdue the assassin mere seconds before it could strike. The council chambers erupted into chaos as security forces swarmed in. But amidst the confusion, one thing was clear. Charles and Wazin's quick action had saved the council president's life and demonstrated the remarkable potential of human-Saurian unity. As the dust settled and order was restored, Charles and Wazin found themselves the center of attention once again. The council members looked at them with a mixture of awe and newfound respect. The council president, her voice slightly shaken but firm, addressed the assembly. "What we have witnessed here today is extraordinary. It is clear that the cooperation between humans and Saurians represents a significant development in galactic affairs." She turned to Charles and Wazin, her eyes shining with gratitude and curiosity. "Please, continue your testimony. I believe we all have much to learn from your experiences." As Charles began to speak, he felt a surge of hope. Despite the challenges that lay ahead, the threat of Arcturian attack, the opposition from within their own societies, and the complexities of the HFY, he knew that together, humans and Saurians had the potential to shape a brighter future for the galaxy. Wazin stood by his side, her scales shimmering with purpose and pride. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. Allies. The council chambers buzzed with excitement as Charles and Weisen concluded their testimony, painting a vivid picture of the potential that lay in human-saurian cooperation. Months passed, and that potential began to materialize in the form of the Human-Saurian Integration Project, HSIP space station. The massive structure hung in Earth's orbit like a shining beacon of interspecies collaboration. Charles and Weisen stood in the central control room, overlooking the bustle of activity below. "It's incredible," Charles mused, watching as human and saurian scientists worked side by side in the laboratories. "To think, just a year ago, we could barely understand each other." Weisen's scales rippled with agreement. "And now we're pushing the boundaries of what both our species thought possible." Their contemplation was interrupted by Dr. Elena Martinez, who burst into the control room, her eyes wide with excitement. "Charles, Weisen, you need to see this immediately." They followed her to the main research lab, where a holographic display showed a series of complex genetic sequences. "We've been monitoring the volunteers' genetic makeup over the past few months," Dr. Martinez explained, her voice trembling with excitement. "The changes we're seeing, they're permanent." Charles leaned in, studying the data. "You mean—" "Yes," Dr. Martinez confirmed. "The enhanced abilities triggered by human-saurian proximity persist even when individuals are separated. We're looking at a fundamental shift in both species' genetic code." The implications of this discovery sent shockwaves through both Earth and the saurian homeworld. President Elena Rodriguez wasted no time in capitalizing on this breakthrough. Within weeks, she announced the formation of the Galactic Defense Initiative, GDI, an elite military unit combining the best of both species. Charles and Weisen found themselves at the helm of this unprecedented force, overseeing training exercises on the HSIP station. They watched as human soldiers demonstrated feats of strength that would have been impossible just months ago, while saurian strategists devised battle plans with an emotional insight that left their instructors in awe. But as the GDI took shape, storm clouds gathered on the horizon. Long-range sensors picked up the unmistakable signature of an Arcturian battle fleet, confirming their worst fears. The attack they had long anticipated was finally coming. On Earth, Senator Victor Graves seized upon the growing unease among the population. His Earth-first movement gained traction, playing on fears of genetic alteration and loss of human identity. Charles watched with growing concern as footage of protests outside military bases flashed across the news feeds. "We cannot allow these aliens to corrupt our very DNA," Graves shouted to a crowd of supporters, his face contorted with rage. "This is nothing short of an invasion at the genetic level." Similar scenes played out on the saurian homeworld, where Kazoth's conservative faction spread insidious rumors about human mind control. Reports of violence against human researchers trickled in, threatening to unravel the delicate alliance. Amidst this growing chaos, Charles and Weisen made a startling discovery in the HSIP laboratories. They had been working late, poring over data from the latest round of integration experiments, when Charles noticed an anomaly in the brainwave patterns of a human-saurian pair. "Weisen, look at this," he said, pulling up the data on a larger display. "These patterns, they're synchronized in a way we've never seen before." Weisen's scales shimmered with excitement as she studied the readouts. "It's almost as if they're sharing thoughts." Further tests confirmed their suspicions. The genetic changes induced by human-saurian interaction were unlocking latent telepathic abilities between the two species. It was a discovery that could revolutionize interspecies communication, or tear their alliance apart if it fell into the wrong hands. Before they could fully process this new development, alarms blared throughout the station. The Arcturian fleet had entered the solar system. The next hours were a blur of activity as the human-saurian alliance mobilized its defenses. Hybrid starships, the pride of their joint engineering efforts, moved into position. The GDI deployed to key strategic locations, their enhanced abilities already proving invaluable in predicting and countering Arcturian maneuvers. Charles and Weisen coordinated the defense from the HSIP station, which had been hastily converted into a command center. They watched as the first wave of Arcturian ships engaged their forces, energy weapons lighting up the void of space. We're holding our own, Charles observed, studying the tactical displays. The GDI teams are performing even better than we hoped. But their cautious optimism was short-lived. A massive energy pulse erupted from the heart of the Arcturian fleet, washing over their defensive lines. On the comms, human and Saurian soldiers alike cried out in pain and confusion. "What was that?" Charles demanded, turning to the sensor operators. A Saurian analyst, her scales pale with shock, responded, "It appears to be some kind of neural disruptor. It's interfering with the enhanced abilities of our troops." Weazen's eyes met Charles's, a look of fierce dedication passing between them. "We need to find a way to counter this weapon," she said, "or everything we've worked for will be lost." As reports of faltering defenses flooded in, Charles and Weazen retreated to the HFY laboratories. Their newly discovered telepathic potential might hold the key to defeating the Arcturian weapon, but time was running out. They worked feverishly, pushing their own enhanced abilities to the limit as they sought a way to amplify and broadcast the telepathic connection. The station shuddered around them as Arcturian weapons found their mark, but they pressed on. Finally, after what felt like hours of desperate experimentation, they had a working theory. By using the HFY station's powerful communication array, they might be able to activate the latent telepathic abilities in all human-Saurian pairs across the battlefield, creating a collective mental shield against the Arcturian neural weapon. But the risks were enormous. Such a large-scale activation could permanently alter the brain chemistry of every human and Saurian involved in the conflict. And with opposition groups on both Earth and the Saurian homeworld already spreading fear and mistrust, this move could shatter the alliance even as it saved them from the Arcturians. Charles looked at Weazen, seeing his own conflicted emotions reflected in her alien features. "If we do this," he said quietly, "there's no going back. We'll be changing the course of both our species forever." Weazen's scales rippled with a complex pattern of colors, conveying a depth of emotion that words alone couldn't express. "We've come too far to turn back now," she replied. "Whatever happens, we face it together." With a shared nod of commitment, they began the final preparations for their high-stakes endeavor. As Charles initiated the station's communication array, Weazen monitored the incoming battle data. The fate of two worlds, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. The array hummed to life, building to a crescendo as it prepared to broadcast the signal that would activate the telepathic potential in countless human-Saurian pairs across the battlefield. Charles's finger hovered over the activation switch, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. In that moment of hesitation, the station rocked violently from a direct hit. Warning klaxons blared as systems across the HSIP began to fail. Charles stumbled, his hand instinctively reaching out to steady himself. As his palm slammed down on the control panel, the activation switch depressed under his weight. The communication array flared to life, unleashing a pulse of energy that rippled out across the solar system, its effects yet unknown. Charles and Weazen stared at each other, the realization of what had just happened sinking in. There was no turning back now. For better or worse, the future of human-Saurian relations, and the outcome of the battle raging around them, had been irrevocably altered. The energy pulse from the HSIP station's communication array rippled outward, enveloping the battlefield in an invisible wave of neural stimulation. For a moment, all seemed still. Then chaos erupted. Across the solar system, human and Saurian soldiers alike clutched their heads, overwhelmed by the sudden influx of sensory information. Charles watched the tactical displays in horror as entire squadrons faltered, their formations breaking apart as individuals struggled to process the abrupt change in their neural chemistry. "What have we done?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms and urgent communications flooding the command center. Weazen's scales flickered with a mixture of concern and persistence. "We've given them a chance," she replied, her clawed hands flying over the control panels. "Look." On the main view screen, pockets of resistance began to form amidst the chaos. Human-Saurian pairs who had worked closely together for months seemed to recover faster, their movements becoming more coordinated with each passing second. "They're adapting," Charles breathed, a glimmer of hope returning to his eyes. "The neural pathways we theorized, They're forming. As they watched, the tide of battle began to shift. Human pilots anticipated the movements of their Saurian gunners with uncanny precision, while Saurian tacticians relayed complex strategies to their human counterparts without uttering a word. The Arcturian forces, caught off guard by this sudden change in their opponent's behavior, began to falter. But the victory was far from assured. Charles's attention was drawn to a cluster of red indicators on the tactical display, marking human and Saurian soldiers who had collapsed under the strain of the telepathic activation. "We need to get medical teams to those locations immediately," he ordered, his voice tight with concern. "If the Arcturians realize what's happening—" His words were cut short as a new alert blared through the command center. The Arcturian fleet was shifting its formation, concentrating fire on the areas where collapsed soldiers had left gaps in the defensive lines. "They're adapting too," Wiesen observed grimly. "We need to—" She froze mid-sentence, her eyes going wide. Charles felt it too, a strange sensation at the edge of his consciousness, like a door opening in his mind. Suddenly he could sense Wiesen's thoughts, her emotions washing over him in a flood of alien sensations. "It's happening to us too," he realized aloud, his voice filled with wonder and trepidation. Their moment of shared discovery was interrupted by a priority transmission from Earth. President Rodriguez's face appeared on the main screen, her expression a mask of awe-inspiring fury. "What the hell is going on up there, Collins?" she demanded. "We're getting reports of mass hysteria across the globe. Graves is whipping his supporters into a frenzy, calling this an act of alien sabotage." Before Charles could respond, another transmission cut in. This one from the Saurian homeworld. The High Counselor's scales were pale with distress as he spoke. "The conservative factions are attempting a coup," he reported, his voice strained. "They claim the humans have weaponized our biology. Our own military is divided, unsure where their loyalties should lie. We need answers, and we need them now." Charles and Wiesen exchanged a look, their newly formed telepathic bond allowing them to communicate volumes in an instant. They knew the enormity of what they had set in motion and the responsibility that now rested on their shoulders. "Madam President, High Counselor," Charles began, his voice steady despite the turmoil in his mind. "What we've done is activate a latent potential in both our species. It's not a weapon or a sabotage attempt. It's evolution." Over the next hour, as the battle continued to rage around them, Charles and Wiesen explained their discovery and the reasons behind their daring plan. They watched as understanding dawned on the faces of their leaders, followed quickly by the weight of the implications. "You realize what this means," President Rodriguez said quietly. "If this telepathic link continues to develop, we could become something entirely new," the High Counselor finished, his scales shimmering with a complex mix of emotions. As if to underscore their point, reports began flooding in from the front lines. Human-Saurian pairs who had been in prolonged contact were displaying abilities far beyond what either species was capable of individually. They moved with impossible grace, anticipated enemy attacks before they happened, and devised strategies of mind-boggling complexity. "It's not just communication," Wiesen explained, her voice filled with awe. "They're sharing consciousness, pooling their knowledge and experiences. The potential is limitless." The implications of this development sent shockwaves through both Earth and the Saurian homeworld. Debates erupted in government chambers and public forums alike. Some saw it as the dawn of a new era, a chance for unprecedented galactic cooperation. Others viewed it as the death knell of their species, a loss of identity and culture that could never be recovered. Amidst this philosophical maelstrom, the Arcturian fleet began to withdraw from several key engagements. Charles studied the tactical displays with growing unease. "This is too orderly to be a full retreat," he mused, his brow furrowed in concentration. "They're up to something." His suspicions were confirmed moments later as long-range sensors detected a massive energy buildup within the heart of the Arcturian armada. Intelligence reports, hastily compiled by the newly enhanced human-Saurian analysts, painted a grim picture. "They're preparing to deploy some kind of superweapon," Wiesen reported, her scales pale with shock. "The energy readings, it could destroy entire planets." The realization hit Charles like a physical blow. Everything they had fought for, everything they had sacrificed, could be undone in an instant. Unless... He turned to Wazin, their eyes meeting in a moment of silent communication. They both knew what needed to be done, and the price it would exact. "We need to push the telepathic network to its limits," Charles said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Fully embrace the hybrid consciousness. It's the only way we'll have the strength to stop that weapon." Wazin's scales rippled with a complex pattern of emotions, fear, persistence, and something else, something uniquely human that she had absorbed through their bond. "You realize what this means," she said softly. "For both our species. For us." Charles nodded, feeling the weight of two worlds resting on their shoulders. "We'll be forever changed," he acknowledged. "But if we do nothing, we'll be forever gone." With a shared nod of tenacity, they turned back to the control panels. As they began the process of amplifying the telepathic network to its full potential, alarms blared throughout the station. The Arcturian superweapon was powering up, its energy signature growing stronger by the second. In that moment, as Charles and Wazin worked feverishly to unlock the true potential of human-Saurian cooperation, they knew they were standing at the precipice of a new era. Whether it would be an era of unparalleled unity or unimaginable loss remained to be seen. The fate of two worlds hung in the balance as the final confrontation loomed. The Arcturian superweapon hummed with deadly energy, a stark reminder of the price of failure. And in the heart of the HSIP station, two beings, no longer fully human or Saurian, raced against time to guide their species through an evolutionary leap unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. The energy readings from the Arcturian superweapon spiked, leaving Charles and Wazin with no choice. They shared a final look, a silent acknowledgement of what they were about to do, and then closed their eyes. In an instant, their minds merged completely. The barriers between human and Saurian consciousness dissolved, creating something entirely new. Charles felt Wazin's alien thought patterns intertwine with his own, while Wazin experienced the flood of human emotions coursing through her. Their melded consciousness expanded outward, touching the minds of every human Saurian pair across the battlefield. Like a spark igniting a powder keg, their union triggered a cascade of neural connections. Across ships, ground forces, and command centers, humans and Saurians found their minds linking in ways they never thought possible. In the OSIP Command Center, displays lit up with unprecedented activity. Neural scans showed a web of connections forming between brains, creating a vast, interconnected network that spanned both fleets. "It's working," Charles Wazin whispered, their voice a strange blend of human and Saurian tones. "We are one." The hybrid consciousness absorbed tactical data at lightning speed, processing strategies faster than any computer. In seconds, a plan formed, bold, risky, but with a chance of success. Across the fleet, pilots and gunners moved in perfect synchronization. Ships jumped in and out of hyperspace, appearing at multiple points around the Arcturian armada simultaneously. The maneuver was so precise, so impossible, that the Arcturian fleet froze in confusion. Admiral Zorak of the Arcturian flagship stared at his tactical display in disbelief. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "No force can coordinate jumps with such precision." His answer came in the form of a devastating assault. Human pilots, their movements guided by Saurian tactical insight, wove through Arcturian defenses as if they were standing still. Saurian gunners, their aim sharpened by human intuition, landed shots that seemed to bend the laws of physics. As the space battle raged, a small team led by the Charles Wazin hybrid slipped through the chaos. Their ship, guided by the collective knowledge of thousands of minds, navigated the Arcturian defenses with ease. They boarded the Arcturian flagship, moving through its corridors like ghosts. Security systems, designed to detect either human or Saurian intruders, failed to recognize the hybrid lifeforms. In minutes, they reached the heart of the ship, the superweapons control center. The door slid open, revealing the Arcturian High Command. Admiral Zorak turned, his compound eyes widening at the sight of the human-Saurian hybrids. "What are you?" he asked, a tremor in his voice. Charles Wazin stepped forward, When they spoke, it was with a voice that carried the weight of two species. "We are the future," they said, "and we are here to end this war." Jorak's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation. Perhaps we can negotiate," he offered, his eyes darting to the superweapon controls. The hybrid consciousness saw through the ploy instantly. They perceived Jorak's true intentions, to stall for time while he activated the weapon. In a blur of motion that combined human reflexes with Saurian strength, Charles Wazin neutralized the Arcturian leader. As Jorak fell, the other hybrids moved to secure the room. Their hands flew over the alien controls, guided by the collective knowledge of the human Saurian fleet. In moments, the superweapon powered down, its threat neutralized. Outside, the Arcturian fleet found itself outmaneuvered and outgunned. With their ultimate weapon disabled and their command structure in chaos, they had no choice but to surrender. As the hybrid forces secured the Arcturian ships, Charles Wazin turned their attention to the challenges that lay ahead. They knew that fear and resistance would be spreading across Earth and the Saurian homeworld. To quell the panic, they needed to act quickly. Using the combined power of human and Saurian communication technology, they broadcast a message to both worlds. But this was no ordinary transmission. Along with words and images, they sent the very experiences and memories of the hybrid individuals. Across Earth and the Saurian homeworld, people and Saurians alike found themselves immersed in the shared consciousness. They felt the fear, the uncertainty, and ultimately the unity that had led to victory. In that moment of connection, much of the fear and resistance melted away. The Galactic Council, monitoring the situation closely, was stunned by the display of power and cooperation. In an emergency session, they voted to fast-track the Human-Saurian Alliance's membership application. Earth and the Saurian homeworld were granted a unique joint seat, recognizing them as a new unified entity in galactic affairs. As the days turned to weeks, the intensity of the hybrid consciousness began to fade. Individuals slowly regained their sense of self, but the connection remained. Humans found they could still sense the thoughts and feelings of their Saurian counterparts, and vice versa. The boundaries between the species had been forever blurred. In the aftermath of the war, Charles and Wazin found themselves at the center of a new society. The bond they had forged, once a necessity for survival, had blossomed into something deeper. In a ceremony that blended elements of human and Saurian culture, they formalized their union, symbolizing the permanent joining of their species. Months passed, and the hybrid society flourished. The combined intellect and abilities of humans and Saurians led to advancements in technology, medicine, and space exploration. The Galactic Council watched with interest as this new hybrid civilization took its first steps onto the galactic stage. As a symbol of this new era, a state-of-the-art exploration vessel was commissioned. Its crew, composed entirely of human-Saurian hybrids, represented the best of both species. Charles and Wazin, recognized for their role in forging this new future, were chosen to lead the mission. They stood on the bridge of the new ship, surrounded by displays and crew members that showcased the perfect blend of human and Saurian design. As final preparations for launch were made, Charles turned to Wazin, a smile playing on his lips. "Ready for our next adventure?" he asked, his voice carrying a hint of excitement that would have been unthinkable for a Saurian just months ago. Wazin's eyes sparkled with an emotion that she had learned from her human half. "Always," she replied, her scaled hand intertwining with Charles's fingers. As the ship's engines hummed to life, Charles and Wazin faced the view screen together. The stars beckoned, promising new discoveries and challenges. But whatever lay ahead, they would face it as one. Not just as a couple, but as the living embodiment of their two species' shared future. The ship accelerated, streaking into the starry expanse. As Earth and the Saurian homeworld faded behind them, Charles and Wazin felt a sense of anticipation. They had rewritten the futures of their species and reshaped the balance of power in the galaxy. Now, as they ventured into uncharted space, they couldn't help but wonder, what other impossibilities awaited them among the stars?
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.